Month of December, one of the things that is a bit of a tradition at UUI is as we move through the seasons with all of these different holidays and celebrations, our service topics also move through the world's great spiritual traditions. And last Sunday we talked about Hanukkah and we drew from inspiration from Judaism. And this Sunday we are looking at Buddhism and drawing inspiration from that tradition, among other sources. And there is an associated holiday. December 8th is Bodhi Day, which in Japan is a day when Buddhists celebrate the achievement of enlightenment by Siddhartha Gautama, the Buddha. Bodhi Day is a lunar holiday in other cultures, so it moves around the calendar, but in Japan it is always December 8th. So happy Bodhi Day to all of the Buddhists. The story goes that when Prince Siddhartha Gautama, the man who would become the Buddha, was born, there was a prophecy that this boy would either become a great and powerful king or a great religious teacher. Well, his mother died in childbirth, and so it was given to his father to raise him. And since he was already a prince, he was well positioned to become a great and powerful king. And honestly, his father thought maybe that would be for the best. He liked that option. So he took great pains to keep Siddhartha confined to the palace and to raise him up in all ways kingly, but also to keep him sheltered from all matters religious or spiritual, or from any care or trouble that might set his mind to wandering or wondering if there was anything more than just the palace. But one day, Siddhartha insisted on visiting the local village, and having escaped from the confines of the earthly pleasures of the palace, he discovers all at once old age and sickness and death. And he learns that these things are the inescapable fate of all people, and he is so disillusioned to have the veil of his happy, carefree palace life pierced by the reality of human suffering, that he decides that he needs to learn more, and he needs to learn what lies beyond this. And he is moved by compassion to help people that are suffering. And then he sees a holy man. That is the fourth thing that he sees that propels him to become the Buddha. He sees a holy man, and he learns that this sort of life is possible. And he decides that he is going to leave palace life behind and set to wandering so he can find the cure for suffering and bring enlightenment to the world. Well, there were a lot of wandering holy men back in that day. So Siddhartha is in good company. He wanders with the best of them for 6 long years. And at first he seeks enlightenment in the renunciation of the body, in ascetic practices. And he is so good at renouncing his body that he very nearly kills himself from starvation. But he finds that starving himself does not bring him any closer to enlightenment, quite the opposite. So he decides this must be a false path. And so he eats a little bit of rice and he drinks a little bit of milk, a brazen act of self-indulgence that gets him kicked right out of the wandering holy man movement. So he decides he's going to go it alone, and having strengthened his body, he sees a Bodhi tree in the distance. And he says, instead of torturing my body, I am going to purify my mind, and that will be my path to enlightenment. And he sits down at the base of the Bodhi tree, determined that he will meditate and he will not rise until he has found enlightenment. And so he sits there meditating, one version of the legend goes, for 49 days. For 49 days he meditates, and on the evening of the 49th day, enlightenment comes, and by dawn, Siddhartha has become the Buddha, the enlightened one who has solved the problem of suffering for humanity. Now, the solution to the problem of suffering for humanity is a topic for another day. My question for today is, and what this story makes me curious about, is what happened on the 49th day? What was so special about that day? Because I imagine what Siddhartha must have been feeling after 48 days of fruitless meditation, seemingly no nearer to his goal. And the legend says that while Siddhartha meditated under the Bodhi tree, the demon god Mara attacked him with visions of doubt and fear and sought to distract him with temptations. And you can imagine how he might have been feeling all of these things, doubt and fear and self-loathing and temptation to just leave this. All of these fears piling up day after day. Am I wasting my time? Am I on the right track? What am I even doing here sitting under a tree? Are people talking about me? Is this even possible, what I'm trying to do? 48 days under the tree and nothing, and then suddenly enlightenment. What changed between the 48th and the 49th day? The ancient Greeks have two very different words for time, representing two different concepts of time. The first word that they have is chronos, which corresponds to how we normally think of time in the West as chronological time, as something that is measurable and quantifiable. If we're talking about something that lasted for 2 hours or 2 days, we're talking about chronos. If we say, I'm going to go for a walk at 4 o'clock, that's chronos. And interestingly, this kind of time, chronological time, is named after the Greek god Kronos, who was born of heaven and earth. He was the father of Zeus and Hera and Hades and Poseidon, all the big gods that you may know from back in 6th grade. And the story goes that when Kronos became a father, there was a prophecy that one of his children would overthrow him. And so he swallowed all of his children as they were born so that this wouldn't happen. And in the same way, chronological time consumes all of us who are its children. Fortunately, in the myth, Zeus escapes and frees his siblings, but that's another story. But the Greeks recognized another kind of time apart from chronos, which they called Kairos. And Kairos is not linear time. It is not predictable, measurable time. Kairos means the fullness of time. Kairos is propitious time. It is the moment when a time has arrived and something new can be born. It is the right time to do a thing. Now, in Christian philosophy, which is heavily influenced by Greek philosophy, Kairos is God's time. It is the time when something has unfolded according to God's design. But with or without a God behind it, the point is we humans can plan and desire and intend all we want, but things develop on their own schedule and arrive on their own time. And before the moment of Kairos, a thing is impossible, however much we might want it to be so. And after the moment of Kairos, it becomes possible. So a story. When I was 18, I went away for college. And not having had the best time in high school, I was feeling that desire that you have at that age to sort of reinvent yourself a little bit. I wanted to reinvent myself. I wanted to push my own boundaries and do something a little bit out of character for me. Just try something new, something that the old high school me would never have done. So I decided, what a great time to take up smoking. Now, I knew that smoking was not a great idea in terms of long-term health risks, right? I got that. But that wasn't going to be a problem because my plan was just to smoke for a little while, right? I wasn't going to become a smoker. I was just going to smoke cigarettes day after day for a little while and then quit. So jump ahead 6 years, and I'm now a pack-a-day smoker. Because it turns out that at age 18, I didn't have a working concept of addiction. And what that means. I wasn't prepared for that reality of addiction, and that you can want something and not be able to do it nonetheless, and that your body and mind, your will can be totally disjointed. I liked smoking except for the expense and the fact that it made my parents very unhappy. But also I had asthma. I always have. This is another reason it was so brilliant for me to take up smoking at age 18. Because after 6 years of being a pack and a half a day smoker, breathing and smoking were not working so well for me. They weren't really playing well together. And I was beginning to get a little concerned about this by this point. And one winter when I was 24, I got bronchitis, which I'm prone to get anyway. And the smoking and the asthma got so aggravated to the point where I was really struggling to breathe. So I ended up going to the emergency room, and they at least got my lungs opened so that I could breathe. And one of the doctors actually wrote on the prescriptions pad, like, "quit smoking," in big letters, and sent me home with it. And for the next several days, I didn't smoke because I couldn't. My lungs were so aggravated from the bronchitis and the asthma and all that, that it really, it hurt way too much to smoke a cigarette. But what I discovered was that I could still light a cigarette, and I could kind of hold it up close to my face. And that was sort of like smoking. It was just enough like smoking that I could kind of power through those days and resume smoking. The point is, I was very, very addicted to cigarettes at that age. I smoked for 2 more years, actually, after that, dealing with chronic asthma flare-ups and telling myself that I would quit any day now, but not actually ever quitting. And then when I was 26, I became a father, and I was determined that I would quit, for real this time. So I quit, cold turkey, just like that. Quit. And then 3 days later, I bought a pack of cigarettes and I started again. So I said a bunch of mean things to myself in my head, and I tore up all of the cigarettes and I quit. Just like that. And the next day I bought a pack of cigarettes and I started again. So I wrote a vow on a piece of paper, "I will stop smoking," and I signed it and I dated it and I pinned it above my computer on the wall. And then 2 days later, I bought a pack of cigarettes and I started again. And this is how it went for me quitting smoking. I must have quit smoking 25 times over the course of 6 months, quitting smoking and then failing to quit smoking again and again and again. It was completely exhausting, just failing over and over and over again. And then one day I quit for the 26th time. And whatever it was really easy. It was really easy. I quit. I was done. I've never smoked a cigarette since, and I've never really even wanted a cigarette since. And that was 20 years ago. And here's the thing. I have no idea what happened between the 25th time and the 26th time. I don't know what changed. I don't know what I did differently. If I did anything differently, I don't think I did. It wasn't possible for me to quit, and then it was possible for me to quit. And this is an experience that I have always found profoundly puzzling, but also profoundly humbling. Profoundly humbling. And humility is our worship theme for the month of December. Last week we talked about stepping into a moment. We said, paradoxically, it is a form of humility, not to play small when life calls on us, but to set aside our fears and step into a moment. And today, I wanted to approach this issue of humility from the other direction, because sometimes we will be trying to step into a moment, but the moment isn't there. It isn't there. Its Kairos has not arrived. And this is profoundly humbling. It can be frustrating. It can be disheartening. Let me tell you, smoking attempt number 19, pretty grim. We launch a business, and the business, which is founded on a really great idea, just doesn't take hold. We work to repair a relationship with a partner or a friend or a child, and the relationship remains stuck. Or we tell ourselves, this is the year when we finally do X, whatever X is. We're going to cook healthier, write that novel, walk a mile a day, learn Italian, get a new job, visit our parents more often. Only it turns out that this isn't the year when we're going to do that at all. This is a part of what it means to be human. This is a part of what it means to be human. Our fresh, fertile, heartfelt new ventures sometimes fail. Sometimes our habits, our addictions, our inertia, our patterns of behavior, they overwhelm our aspirations. Sometimes, no matter how vigorously we are swimming and no matter how sure it seems our strokes are, We find ourselves treading water, and we may even be borne backwards by the tides. And what are we to do with this? What are we to do with this when we want something so much and its Kairos has not arrived? Well, surely, sometimes at least, it is the height of wisdom to know when to say when to throw in the towel. If I may quote the inimitable Kenny Rogers, you've got to know when to hold 'em, know when to fold 'em, know when to walk away, and know when to run. Not everything is meant to be. And sometimes we are truly holding on too long to some hope or some idea or some ambition that no longer serves us or no longer serves our family or the world. And it can be positively liberating to let something go. Letting go of fruitless endeavors frees up our life and our energy for new possibilities. And there are things that we can do to help with that discernment. Is it time to let go? Or is this something whose Kairos has just not arrived? There's a logical fallacy called the Napoleon fallacy sometimes, after Napoleon's sort of infamously unwise decision to keep pressing on through Russia despite the fact that it was killing his entire army. And the Napoleon fallacy is when we look at a project and we say, I have wasted too much time and money on this, not to waste even more time and money on this. Right? So we can ask ourselves about some project where we're grappling with, is it time to let go, or are we waiting on Kairos? And we're feeling slogged down. If this were a completely new endeavor, would we start it up today? If this was day zero, would I choose to start this new venture today? And if the answer is no, I'm only doing this because of my perceived past investment, maybe that is telling us something. There are other questions to ask. Was this our endeavor to begin with? Or did we inherit it and now we feel like we're obligated to hold on to it? That can happen in family often, even with like physical objects, right? You've got this thing, you don't want it, but you sure can't get rid of it because you've inherited it. There are lots of things that are like that in our lives, not just objects. Are we doing this because we believe in it or because someone is telling us we ought to believe in it? Are we doing something because we love it or out of fear of being shamed or criticized? Or because we've been told this is what men do, or this is what wives do, or dutiful children, this is what you're supposed to do? Maybe we can let go of this thing that doesn't seem to be going anywhere. But maybe we are doing something we love, something we value, something we would choose every day, something we believe in, or just something we really need to do for good reasons and it is not happening. Sometimes our efforts are just waiting for the fullness of time. Artists know what that's like, right? Inspiration shows up on its own timetable. Of course, if we're not doing our part, it may never show up. But still, we can't force it. We can't just snap our fingers and make inspiration happen. We can maybe get better at coaxing it out of the corner if it's feeling shy, but creativity happens in Kairos time, not chronological time. Deadlines do help. That's a real thing. Understanding often happens in Kairos time. There are a lot of teachers in this room, and I'm sure every one of you has had like an Anne Sullivan miracle worker moment, right? Where you've been working with a child on a concept, and they are just not getting it. And they're just not getting it, and they're just not getting it. And then one day, like, this light goes on, and they get it. And it's beautiful. And maybe you found some new angle of approach that turned on that light bulb. But maybe not. Maybe it was just that they needed to hear it for the 57th time. Maybe their brain needed to develop just a little bit more. Maybe they had a good breakfast that day and a good night's sleep, and they just needed that combination of mind and body for something to trick. Maybe their new sneakers were making them feel extra confident, and they decided that, yes, I am a kid who can do things. Right? Like, how do you know? Who knows? Sometimes it's Kairos, and it's not given to us to know why things are unfolding in the fullness of time. And sometimes we are our own Anne Sullivan, and we are our own uncomprehending student who suddenly comprehends both at the same time. Because after all, our bodies are constantly changing, and our brains are constantly changing, and our contexts are constantly changing. And we don't know when the right combination of those things are going to align and the thing that was impossible becomes possible. We can't know when our own moment of Kairos will arrive. And the insight or the emotional change that has eluded us is suddenly within our grasp. Sometimes, as the poet says, after the questions, the doubts, and the hours of contemplation, there will be gold through the gray, promise fulfilled and truth revealed. Our lives and our beings are shot through with mystery. We are all of us much larger beings than we know, capable of so much more than we know, so much more than our ego can understand or identify at any one time. But that vastness, that mystery within us, sometimes it unfolds on its own time. And we are waiting for that Kairos, for that potential within us to be born as a new reality. Any reasonable observer might have concluded that my 26th try to quit smoking would be just as unsuccessful as the previous 25, and that would have been wrong. And I had concluded that as well, and I was wrong, because I was larger than I knew, and so are we all. Humility counsels patience with ourselves and with others. Not infinite patience, not self-destructive patience, but patience nonetheless. Generous patience. And if we can make space for a little grace and a little good humor while we are waiting, that can only be for the good, because it is not given to us in life to control outcomes. It is not given to us in life to control outcomes. Humility says, let it go. Let go of the outcome. You never had it in your hand to begin with, so you might as well let it go. This is a very Buddhist idea, that we focus on doing the right thing, that we focus on right action and right thought, the things that we can control, and we let go of the outcomes of our actions which we cannot control. This is what the Buddha learned about suffering that he wanted to tell humanity. Don't try to hold on to those things which were never placed into your hands to begin with. And it is profoundly humbling to recognize how little in life we can control. And it can be scary to admit that even to ourselves, because we want what we want. And it is one thing to say, don't get attached to outcomes, as the Buddha says. And it is something else entirely to confront our lack of control. Because sometimes outcomes matter a great deal. If the outcome is that we stop drinking, or that a law that is hurting people gets repealed, or that the pain of bereavement will someday lessen for us, or that a loved one will seek help that only they can choose to seek. It can take considerable courage and fortitude to keep doing the right thing, to stay on the path, to take the generous, kind, and compassionate action, knowing that we don't control the outcome, and to trust that some color will break through the gray when the moment of Kairos arrives. In the meantime, what is also given to us and what we can choose is to love one another. We can practice compassion and kindness, knowing that we are all of us in some season of waiting in our lives. It may be a great matter, it may be for a small matter, but it is all of us. We are all in a season of waiting for some Kairos in our lives. And knowing this, we can be there for one another in the meantime. And just as we can never know exactly what brings that moment of Kairos, we can also never know the true value of a kind word, a smile, a remembrance, a shared meal, or a sympathetic shoulder. It is by such small and faithful acts that a community cares for its own. And through our covenant every Sunday, we are commended to one another. So, I commend you to one another. Be good to each other. Be kind and compassionate and loving in our season of waiting. And wherever you are in your season of waiting, I hope you find kindness and comfort here. And I hope we may be of hope and comfort to one another. Blessed be, and amen.